We've been doing marathon coverage, as it indeed merited marathon coverage over a marathon exercise that has happened over the past 36 hours in the national capital. Let's take a point of focus as we go ahead on a good friend to India and Europe, France under Emmanuel Macron. We have now a host of irritations, some, one would have to say, being deliberately perpetuated by the British establishment against India. For some reason best known to the Germans themselves, they still have some itch which they felt they have not scratched well enough. That not too long ago, the German foreign minister, standing with Bilawal Bhutto, of all people, basically threatening intervention in Kashmir. This is like a few months ago. But there's something we managed to evolve in the India-France partnership, which has gone beyond these irritations. The Germans haven't been able to wake up to it. The British are sinking it faster than they sunk the U-boats. And the French, however, are striking a different chord, a different note. Ladies and gentlemen, France is a great country with great historicity, the world's first modern day republic. To say that we have shared values in that is an understatement. France is a country that has its own internal issues. You know what's happened very recently over the shooting of a young Muslim boy, an immigrant. You know the issues regarding hijab. You know the issues regarding migration, both illegal and otherwise. The issues of pension reforms. The issues of what qualifies in a modern day era quality of life. Retirement. How long should you work? How many hours a week you should work? There are existential issues that plague France, just like we in India have a lot of issues that we need to internally consider, resolve, move on for. But we don't lecture the French. The Indian Parliament is not standing and holding 5 sessions discussing murders and looting and rioting in France. Similarly, the French are choosing not to lecture us. If you hop across the channel, in the House of Lords, in the House of Commons, MP after MP sitting and discussing farmers' protests here in India, playing host to Khalistanis, the Indian High Commission being attacked, the Indian flag being ripped off from what is technically Indian soil in London, you see a completely different environment. And I don't think Germany has figured out what to do either. So here is a good example, and of course, Prime Minister Modi was the guest of honor at the Bastille Day parade, in which an Indian contingent marched. And we've had a bilateral meeting today between Emmanuel Macron as well as Narendra Modi. A statement has come out. It's a brief statement. It's short on specifics, more on carrying forward things that have already been discussed. So there's nothing specific in the statement that I can bring to your interest. So I'm going to pick up the larger conversation. On the broadcast with me is Wing Commander Sudhakaran, Pramit Pal Chaudhary joining us, Patikrit is in the studios with me, and Dr. Rao on the telecast with us as well. So let me ask Pramit this question. Pramit, I know that there is a coincidence of history that because we don't have historical colonial pending irritations with the French, so it's easier to connect with them. But this relationship is less about lecturing, it's less about interference, there's a confluence of interests, the atmospherics seem to be better, the body language seems to be better. What has gotten cracked in the India-France association that isn't working so well with India-UK, India-Germany, where a lot of irritations remain?
France, as you correctly said, a lot of our relationship there is government driven. It's G to G. There isn't too much in the way of an Indian diaspora in France. I think less than 100,000. We don't have that much people-to-people exchange. We have a decent B2B relationship, a fair amount of trade, but a lot of that is basically weapons, nuclear issue, reactors, and similar things, getting very government-driven. To be fair, we actually have a fair amount of French investment in India, quite a lot, in fact, once you calculate the amounts of not just money coming from France, but money raised by French companies in India to invest here is probably close to $30 billion of FDI cumulative. So that keeps the relationship at a certain level. This doesn't mean that India hasn't had problems, or should we say India has suffered in the French public opinion. If you see the latest Pew surveys, we've seen a sharp drop in India's approval rating among the French, presumably because the same media stories and narrative about Prime Minister Modi and the BJP have percolated to the French media and so on. And definitely some of the French channels have been extremely negative. But that has not affected the bilateral relationship at all. That's been completely kept in isolation. And I think that's partly structural. France is unusual in the sense that the executive is very powerful. Foreign policy is completely driven by the Élysée Palace and not by the National Assembly. But it is an issue that eventually we will probably have to address. But until now, yes, France has been more willing than almost any other larger European countries to basically say what India does within its borders is India's issue, and it is not the issue of the Republic of France to be concerned about this.
Okay, Pathikrit, it's a good example, right? I mean, examples are always sometimes relativistic, right? So we've seen turmoil in France over the past few months. And it's not specific to one cause or one issue. It's the French way of life on how you work and how many hours you work and what your retirement age should be and what pension should look like in modernizing the French economy. We've seen the issues of immigration and colonial legacy in France. We've seen issues regarding faith in France and what you can wear and what you cannot wear. They're very serious issues that France faces. These are not matters. If you see a joint statement, it doesn't say that India raised the issue of violence and encouraged the French to ensure human rights on the streets of France, or India raised the issue of the treatment of minorities in France. You don't see that happening because it's not a lecturing approach that India officially evolves. Yet we have heard a lecturing approach from a lot of other countries. Why is France different?
There are two things. Number one, purely from a practical perspective, the issues that you mentioned, I think a lot of countries who are going through the transitional phases are facing them, and that's why you have sovereign government to deal with those things. So I think there's a certain level of maturity that has been shown both by India and France vis-a-vis the issues of each other's country, which don't meddle. Secondly, France has always been an outlier when it comes to European Union. The rest of the countries, especially Germany or UK, have been far more, adaptive to the line being set by Washington. On many occasions, France actually felt left out. France has a legacy of its own, a culture of its own, the civilization of its own. It always, most of the time, felt uncomfortable to just play the second fiddle role under United States. That's where on many occasions they took a line. In fact, we all know whether it's the Mirage 2000 or whether it's the Rafale or before that, on every occasion when we had a problem with the Pakis, it was the French which came forward and helped us when many others were on the other side. That's one part. Secondly, there is a business aspect of it, Rishabh, also, because for every Dassault, wherever it goes to actually pitch for business, they are actually fighting out with the Eurofighter vis-a-vis the Rafale. On every area, there is a competition they face. In those competitions, you will always find that the British companies more often than not have a blessing of the Americans, where the French are a little left out. If you look at the AUKUS, the French have been left out. The Australians were supposed to take French submarine. They were left out, and the Americans and the British came in. That is where I think the French believe they have not got their share within the European Union. And because of the legacy aspect, self-respect aspect also, I think they find a lot of convergence with India. If had there been a colonial issue with us, what would have happened in that case? Well, that's a very important question and we don't know. But so far as the British are concerned, the colonial hangover, it's still there. African Union becoming part of, G20 is a very, very critical step towards that decolonization, where many of the European countries are still finding it difficult to accept that they can't interfere anymore. So I think France is also going through those transitional phases, but it's very important to understand it has always respected India's culture. Satyajit Ray, one of the first rewards where even people of India actually started recognizing was, Legion d'Honneur, when it was given by the French to Satyajit Ray in 1980s. So I think there is mutual respect from cultural aspect. Second is they do feel they are left out. They haven't got their share of credit and respect so far as European Union and the relation with across the Pacific is concerned. And I think somewhere they're looking forward, because European Union, everything said and done, doesn't have a very, very bright future.
The modern day terminology for it is a vibe. It's just a good vibe. It's just a more comfortable association, which is devoid of unnecessarily provocative irritations. Now a country that is partly French, Canada. You've just seen Justin Trudeau, who carries a partly French surname, just come and create an irritation for no rhyme or reason. All right, he can't help it. There's an itch there. We know his backdrop. We know the emergencies imposed in his country. I'm not expecting a Jai Shankar or a Narendra Modi to go to Justin Trudeau and then issue a statement and say, we raise the issue of the recent imposition of emergency and quashing of fundamental rights and democracy in Canada. I don't expect them to do that. But he is more than upfront in standing and defending extremists, Khalistanis that are perpetuating in Khalistan. So it's very odd why these things happen. Let me get Wing Commander Sudhakaran. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, as Pramit mentioned, the government to government, and government to government translates primarily into the big ticket defense deals. So the Scorpenes submarines, we all know the Rafale, because recently nuclear has been mentioned in the joint statement, so expect some progress there, because Jaitapur has been specifically mentioned, which is a point of progress there. Then of course, Patikrit mentioned the Mirage fighters. So it's been the big ticket. But in the public imagination, in the products we consume, in the tourism and the people who want to go study in Singapore, what does France represent to the Indian imagination?
I visited France somewhere in 2019, and one thing I found in France was it was too liberal and open than any of the fellow states. France, to me, appeared to have the same kind of problem that India has: too much of freedom. You can talk about anyone, anything. You can even undermine your own.
Many would say too much of freedom is not a problem. It's the best thing in the world.
It is the best thing, but it is not controlled. It is unbridled. Sometimes, uncontrolled freedom is a problem. People don't know. There are too many wokes floating around. They don't know why they oppose. And that's a problem that France shares with India. Like even the Americans know how to control it. While you may see in front of White House a lot of people protesting, but if you look at control-wise, as far as the Edward Snowden leaks goes, America is still a very strong surveillance state. France is not. That is also reflected. France has the problem of Islamic terrorism. On and off, you find. We share a lot of these problems in common. And we've seen one thing that has emerged in the last 20, 30 years is that the technology that France brings on table is qualitatively different from their fellow European counterparts. France has been giving us a lot of weapons, and these weapons have proved their worth. Like, for example, the Balakot strikes. We used a vintage Mirage, not even the Rafale class of aircraft. And the Rafale today is one of the best that we have an India-France relationship.
So is there a case, Wing Commander, for more Rafales, perhaps even seaborne ones?
I don't see, because, we are into the AMCA program. Because, see, Rafale is a 4.5 generation aircraft. And to my mind, the onslaught of AI is going to considerably redefine air superiority and air supremacy in a very, very big way. So, buying these aircrafts at the cost that we do, there is a threat that it could go obsolete in the next decade or so, because technology is changing very, very, very fast. So, India is doing the right thing by investing in the AMCA program. We must not only develop the AMCA program, but also accelerate it so that the technology evolution that is happening.
Okay, so let's take the example of the Scorpene, okay, which is now very much built here in India. So, Wing Commander Sudhakaran, has there been the technology transfer which now predates the current conversation on technology transfer? Have the French sort of paved the way of the formula that sort of works for us and works for them?
Not really. See, when we talk about technology transfer, it has not happened to the extent that the Indian government has desired today. While Indian government has said that we need 60% offset, they've not been able to do it. And there are a lot of such things. In fact, even the French have been more than happy to give LD charges on. They've been, more than happy to pay the penalties for not meeting the offset condition. So we have a long way to go. And as far as I'm concerned, nobody's going to gift you technology on a platter. While to sign a deal, there are, hidden terms and conditions which we need to be aware of. We need to develop them indigenously. And under Prime Minister Modi, I think India is on the right path. The only thing is, pace is what is questioned, but I think we will pick it up.
Okay, Dr. Rao, just your perception, because it's a very perceptorial thing, that the constant flurry of needling irritation, and we are not blind people, we are world aware, world wise, we understand our country and we understand the trials and tribulations it faces. Similarly, we see the world and we know what's happening in other countries as well. It's not on you and I to call up the French president and constantly needling about every problem that he faces in Paris. So we don't do it. As a matter of policy, we don't do it. In the media here we discuss it, but we don't do it. So we don't do it with the French, we don't do it with anyone. But the French have been able to show the same kind of independent regard. Is it because, as Pramit says, that because the French president is able to take it away from scrutiny, in the sense that even today when he was asked about Ukraine, he said, look, G20 is not a forum for politics and diplomacy per se, it's a financial forum, but we've incorporated this much and it's gone off well. So what do you make of the French, sir?
Rishabh, French are not the only ones who have resisted the Anglo-Saxon axis. It is also Israel and it is also Russia in Europe. And it is no wonder that all these three have been very supportive of India in all respects. It is not only in armaments that you were discussing. It was also when we had the atomic bomb explosion. France was the only one who stood by us. Russia has stood by us throughout. And you see, Israel is also very supportive of India. So these three countries which resist Anglo-Saxon domination, they are the ones who have been always very supportive to India. And India anyway doesn't needle other countries. We don't poke our business nose into others' business. It is others who have been poking into our, and it's invariably those who are under Anglo-Saxon group, or they are under their domination, which is much of Europe. So even in space, ISRO has received a lot of help from France. And even to this day, it is receiving help, like in monitoring. We don't have deep space monitoring, so we take the help of NASA, and France has been very helpful in helping us monitor our satellites and other things which are not covered, because we have only a center here in India. And even in atomic field, they have been very helpful. They have not been putting ifs and buts and all kinds of terms and conditions. They have been very open towards India. And they have a long history of having a liberal attitude. And like Sudhakaran said, they have been extremely liberal and in free speech in various other things. And no wonder they went and gave the Statue of Liberty to US.
Okay, so let me.
And if you see, even in Pondicherry, their attitude towards India has been very different, which was their colony in India, than what the Portuguese did in Goa and what British was doing in the rest of India.
Okay, so let me just pick up on the thread. Pramit, the old techniques of using certain issues to, beat India with a stick over, every time human rights violations, Kashmir, religious freedom, okay, the standard things. Now today I was trying to listen as carefully as I could, not only to the press conferences, the press statements, but also in the questions that were being asked by both the international media and the foreign media. Of course, they were asking about Ukraine, which is on the top of their priority list. But this time around, with 20 heads of state here, you've seen that the normal, in the end, in the White House, you couldn't help it. There had to be one question that was placed there, which was talking about minorities and stuff. The issues that you use to beat India with a stick over. Have you seen something different happen with the French, with the Australians, even with the Americans now?
Yes, I think it's very clear that the governments of almost most of the major Western countries today, including the United States or France, as has been mentioned, has always been very careful on this issue. Definitely with the Australians, and I would also add the Japanese, have been very clear that they see that the strategic relationship with India is overriding, and they will, if you wish, either ignore or override the human rights or other types of lobbies that have always positioned themselves as critics of India. And definitely critics of the present government in India. And we saw, for example, when Modi and Biden held their summit in Washington, it was not only a state visit, it was almost for 3 days. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, point blank said to the American press, we will not ask about human rights because we have a relationship fundamentally with India that is completely different from anything that probably India's ever had in America since arguably the Nehru-Kennedy years in the 1960s, though the Bush years, George W. Bush years, are also very similar. So we now have a relationship with the West, partly because of the economic potential and growth of India, partly because our position on China has meant that a lot of them now see us as a major strategic partner. And then finally, and I think this is very important to realize, the rise of strategic technology as the primary driver of global geopolitics today. Mm-hmm. That it is not just about military power, it is who controls the future technologies of AI, quantum computing, semiconductors, synthetic biology. This is going to be the primary determinant of power in the 21st century. I've talked to almost any of these governments, they all agree this privately. The Quad is built around this, and fundamentally a belief among all these countries that this cannot be China's technology century, and they are prepared to put India as part of that pantheon of the future, but not China.
Okay, so let me follow up. Has a Narendra Modi, in 10 years as Prime Minister, said and done enough? Said and done, because you now see the terminology which you can relate to, one world, one future, one earth. He's gone to the US joint session and he's spoken about democracy and the free world. Has he said and done enough to give the naysayers who still find a reason to beat India that, okay, even the Pramila Jayapals of the world were part of the standing ovations? So has the point now been underscored?
I would say that the strategic element is now fully understood or becoming fully understood. I'd argue that Western media is still very slow on this front. What I don't think is fully yet understood is the degree with which Modi has revolutionized both Indian political, the political sociology of India, the rise of a new class of Indians, especially the OBCs as the dominant political force in the country. And the kind of radical changes, the interest groups he's broken, the introduction of a front-running digital economic sector, the major reforms he's carried out, that's not appreciated yet. And I don't think that's not going to be fully appreciated until the economic benefits, unfortunately postponed because of 2 years of COVID, start to manifest themselves.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. Okay, Pathikrit, come in on this, because let me ask you then the converse question. has something happened in India that if you wanted to beat India, stick with, Narendra Modi just confirmed and the BJP just confirmed your worst suspicions?
No, we have, see, there are two things happened. First of all, the credit also must go to, Rishabh, to you and many others like you in the same fraternity who have worked to give it back to the Americans, that look, don't try to act too smart every time, because now you have been exposed, because it's in the era of social media, you cannot control information anymore. So there are counter questions being asked to the Americans about the indigenous tribes, to the Americans about gun violence, to the Europeans about the colonial past.
I don't think the Americans honestly care two flying Fs, okay? But I do think that Indians living all over the world do care.
No,
right?
So, the other thing is happening is this. I think the Indians have, become less concerned about what the West says anymore, because they can themselves see the transformation that has happened in the last, 1 decade. As I stated in the previous program also, that there is no, apart from the manicured narratives, there is no single evidence that a minority has been discriminated when it comes to the vaccines. And remember, at a time when the world had no clue or reference point as to how to deal with the virus or the pandemic, India actually showed its industrial scale proficiency to not only manufacture vaccines, but to give it free of cost to everybody. Whether it is that, or whether it is the ration, or whether it is the Mudra scheme, we have actually done it.
Let me rephrase the question. There are going to be some people who genuinely believe, misinformed, but genuinely believe that there's a risk to minorities, risk to Muslims, and a Muslim genocide in India is always, just around the corner. There'll be some people who are actually convinced. But there are some people who know none of that is happening, who deliberately wield it as an irritant to make sure that this can't, there's a natural confluence of interest can't happen. So I think what Pramit is mentioning, and do you agree with, that at least for those people who used to deliberately do it, that they now see a strategic need to actually be friends with India, and therefore they're quietly letting that stick slide into the back of the cupboard.
So Rishabh, there are two aspects of this. Now most of the Western companies have a China plus one strategy when it comes to production.
Yeah, for sure.
That is one aspect of it. Secondly, I might sound a little politically incorrect right now, but you see from 2025 onward, there's going to be a major reset so far as the de-dollarization or the currency aspect of the world is concerned. You would see many of these NGOs, many of these Western media houses, which have been used as an extension of the hybrid war, changing the narrative about India from 2025 onwards, because the dollar flow that funds their narrative will slowly but surely will start getting dried down.
I think
that's
I'll take it as, finish your thought.
Third, a very important thing is that you had three important aspects. Number one, you had Indians going abroad and becoming CEOs of global MNCs. Then you have two things. You had the Indians working over there, and third, many of these global multinational corporations then shifting into India as part of the manufacturing or service providing, and there's a rise of Indian corporates itself. So India is no more a country which is only a base for consumption. You have Indian competitive companies coming up also. India has, of course, the technology aspect is there. Okay. So you have a country whose peaceful rise is being hailed by the global South and Africa.
Okay.
And it is very difficult for the West, which has been rejected by the Africa.
Okay, so let me now go back to Wing Commander Sudhakaran. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, if the French haven't done it, okay, you just saw the German foreign minister not very long ago standing with Bilawal Bhutto. I mean, you're standing with Bilawal Bhutto to discuss Pakistan, yeah, but that's your own business what you do with Pakistan. But go out and specifically, in a well thought through, considered point of view, take up Kashmir in an interventionist point of view. Now, for so many decades, you propped up the Pakistan-Kashmir issue because you kept India pinned down into just dealing with Pakistan all the time, so we couldn't rise above it. Today, you've had 25, I think, record number of heads of government, heads of state have been here, and I don't think Pakistan has been mentioned once by anyone anywhere. So why would the Germans, for example, still be tempted into using these old tricks, these old cards, when the others are shedding them?
See, I wouldn't blame Germans as a nation who are doing it. It is just vestiges of those old colonial mindsets and people who are being fed with money. Like, for example, there were punsters who were talking about our farm protests. And these people, I don't know what locus standi did they have for even, coming on Twitter and then talking about our local politics. Did they even understand what was happening in India? So, there are these group of people funded by the Soros network, the Omidyar network, and these people want to keep India pinned down, hook or crook. There are politicians in India who go to Pakistan, beg to them and tell them, take Modi out somehow. Because, there is a threat for this international mafia, which was having it easy all through. Can we beat it? Our currency was sold to the Pakistani deep state establishment. We didn't even know about it. For 10 to 12 years, 30% of your economy was run by the parallel economy of the mafias operated by the ISI and the network in Europe. So these people are vestiges of that. We can't blame Germany as a country. I don't think that would be right. But then we will have to face people. These people are there in Australia. These people are there in UK. These people are there spread even in US. That's why you will find the front runner for challenging Modi right now as the G20 is happening. Is addressing some students there and then talking all nonsense about India, which is barely the truth. So we need to live to this, and then we need to fight this disinformation campaign. What I would like to tell this country is, you cannot leave the fight against such anti-national forces to one man. There is a bit of battle that you and me have to fight.
Okay.
And that countrymen have to understand sooner or later.
Yeah, and I agree, because I have just a point of disagreement with Pathik, that what the issues that we raise, that that whether that influences Western opinion, probably it doesn't. But does it influence Indian opinion in thinking about what's been going on? Because if you take it at face value and say, oh, here's a report and that tells you you're all Godi, okay. But maybe you should read a report about who owns HBO and who owns Vice and who owns CNN and how all of them sit on some committee that runs foreign policy in the US, and maybe start looking at the world differently. Let me quickly get Dr. Rao. I'm going to take a break in a couple of minutes. I believe Jitendra Singh is standing by as well. Dr. Rao, quick interjection. The other part of the battle of perception, okay, was backward country, can't get its act together, chaotic, messy, dirty, full of people, overpopulated, the snake charmers and the cow worshippers. Are we moving beyond that part?
Definitely, Rishabh. Modi has done a surgical strike on all this crowd in various ways. One, he demonetized. People kept talking about how the demonetization inconvenienced people and various other issues about it on the financial side. But what it did do is to demonetize the money with the Naxalites and with the jihadis. And it was a big break for it. Second, he went ahead and brought in financial inclusion and fought corruption. Corruption is a cancer. Any society, anywhere in the world where there is corruption, you will have the whole situation deteriorating. It is a cancer, kills you from inside. And that is what he has been fighting very effectively. And most of the people who are attacking Modi are those who benefited from the old corrupt hierarchy and system. So these people need to be exposed.
Okay.
Also, we keep focusing on what the Western press is talking about us. We often don't realize what the Chinese have been up to. If Germany, there is a problem, it is this Chinese influence there which is causing the problem.
Yeah, so you replace. So you're seeing a change, right? Now the Americans want to, actually talk up your democratic credentials rather than dismiss you and cut you down. So you're seeing a wave, and of course the Chinese want to do the opposite. Okay, I'm short of time. I need to take a break. Pamit, quick last thought on this. On the last part of the themology, because just about a month ago we've had Chandrayaan, okay. So in terms of a credibility booster, which is something different, that today when you're talking about Nataraja, you're talking about Gandhi, you're talking about Harappa and the Sindhu civilization and bronze and dancing girl and yoga and handicrafts, and one would think that's all you got to offer. The Chandrayaan, is that a seminal moment that says, it's actually, the cultural revivalism does not mean India is still snake charmers?
I think that change has begun. Chandrayaan is just the latest milestone on that front. The digital infrastructure projects of India, the UPI, the Aadhaar, were less publicized because they're just harder to capture outside of India, which is one of the reasons why I think correctly G20 was used by India to publicize this. But if you look at where we are going in terms of even on climate change, look at that. India has created, in effect, now 3 minilateral organizations, the CDRI, the One Solar Alliance, now the One Future Alliance, all of which are effectively new bodies aiming at new global issues and problems which other organizations are failing to address. In many ways, this is the real sign of a great power, that you're able to actually influence other countries with the examples you propose. And we're doing it at an incredibly low price and doing it in a manner that the global south can understand.
Okay.
So yes, Chandrayaan is very important. And you saw immediately Singapore, South Korea, Saudi Arabia came running to India and said, we want to sign a space agreement with you. And we're going to see much more of that type of thing. Yeah, but that's one among several of those things.
Yeah, I want you to think about it for people watching the broadcast. Okay, as you're watching live visuals of the Bharat Mandapam, this is the last thing that's going to be happening. India's Prime Minister, I don't know if you have audio here or not, whether we can hear anything. That's Narendra Modi. He's visiting the media center. He's also visiting the Crafts Bazaar. That is just good form. A lot of people have come from a lot of part of the world. A lot of people have been there morning, evening, night for 3 days. And as the host, just to be there and just at least wave at everyone. It's just good form, it's good manners, it's good hospitality. At least that part is taking place. I'm going to leave the visuals on your screen as you wait and watch for the Prime Minister to enter, and we'll try to get my colleague on the ground, Megha, into this conversation as well. But let me just touch upon then this thought. Pathikrit, just I know we discussed the organizational part of it, but the good form, the good manners, the good approaches, the personal touches that have been put, it's left a good flavor. I mean, I can see it has left a good flavor.
Rishabh, let me tell you one thing. As I was discussing with you, I'm the chief coordinator of one of the engagement groups of G20, which is Y20. And from day one, what we have been told is that it has to be Jan Bhagidari. It has to be a people's movement. So if you look at entire spectrum of G20, including the engagement groups, working groups, Sherpa's track, altogether the number of events in this country is probably going to be around 3,000 to 4,000. We have gone across entire country. Not a single town or city has been spared when it comes to these G20 or Y20 or engagement group events. Everybody has been involved in this decision-making process, policy-making, and the precision with which everything has happened, not just the G20 final summit. If you look at the final summit of the engagement groups or the working groups or the or other Sherpa's track, these summits, everyone was perfect to the point T, from P to A, and everything was perfect. And everything had an oversight from the MEA and the G20 Secretariat. The manner in the logistical aspects of it were taken care of. We have seen it for the last 1 year, and therefore when it became so perfect this time in the final summit, people like us were not surprised, because we have seen that kind of logistical precision, the kind of homework, the kind of negotiations, the kind of mentoring they have done for everybody who have been part of these engagement groups and the working groups. I mean, it is phenomenal what they have done. And the best example, Rishabh, these summits across the country which has happened, people who had any iota of doubt as to how India has evolved, they had the option to go and see for themselves how India has transformed.
I can see the change, and I know and I've seen India develop slowly, right? Delhi for a capital developed slowly, right? So at the point when there was no such thing as a flyover, and there was no such thing as the Delhi metro. So I've seen the evolution, and I can see the rapidity of it. I really think, you're driving past the Mathura road all the time, and while this Mandapam construction was going on, until hey presto it's there. I mentioned this on air, I think a couple of days ago. I was speaking to a union minister, and I was reliably told, that's a fact now. So this is Mandapam as a convention center. There's another one that's come up 10 minutes from the airport, IGI in Dwarka. There's another one, Greater Noida. Altogether, the facilities are now bigger than the largest convention center in Europe, which was in Hanover, the fairgrounds in Hanover. We have more infrastructure now, state of the art, to hold these kind of meetings of the future. But Narendra Modi's already held 10, 12 events in the Mandapam since the inaugural, and this was the biggest one. Dr. Rao wants to make an interjection. Dr. Rao, go ahead.
Yes, just one point. This whole arrangements and the extent of the arrangements and the meticulousness with which the whole thing has been done, mark my words, it is only a question of time when the Olympic movement and FIFA will come requesting India.
Okay, good point. So let me get Wing Commander Sudhakaran. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, last big international event in India, and I know this is a one-day thing, but it's gone on the entire. The last big was CWG, probably about 15 odd years ago, 20 years ago. Now CWG, I remember they were trying to make that one flyover of the Barapulla in Delhi, which went on. It was chaotic, just barely got in there, trying to get the buses organized. It was how traditionally we do things in India. Okay, some jugaad, some last minute paint job, just figure it out somehow, or but nikal do. Okay? That's how we did it last time around. And we took the JN Stadium and we just put a cladding around it and called it a new stadium. So it was a lot of the jugadu approach. I'm not saying jugadu approaches are bad. We use them all the time, but it was very jugadu. This has been a far more slicker operation, no doubt about it.
See, it's not only slicker operation. We'll have to also see one more important point. The kind of infrastructure that we are bringing in are costing us tens of thousands of crores, which means that the investment that the Modi government was talking about in the last fiscal was about bringing up infrastructure, boosting capital expenditure through such projects, which means that the opposition continuously has been blaming that there is lack of employment. Imagine the number of people who would have got employed here. Even the interior decoration that we see in the Bharat Mandapam, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of businesses which would have got benefited out of this, which means that Modi has not only used it to showcase India, but he's also used it. It is a dual-edged weapon. He has also used it to kickstart India's economy from the down spiral that it went during the COVID times. That is the beauty of this man. He works relentlessly 24/7. He has put a curb on big ticket, white collared, top level corruption. I wouldn't say the bottom level is still over because it will take us time, but then he's definitely put a brake on the white collar corruption that used to happen in the corridors of power. Today, journalists don't get free access to the corridors of power like what it used to be. People have to sweat it out and get what they need to after their hard work. Nothing is
I promise you, even if you had free access, nobody except a select few actually know what exactly is happening. So even if you have free access, I've never experienced something like that. But I just want to finish your thought, then I want to take a thought with Pramit, which I'm sure you'll relate with. Yeah. Finish your thought, Wing Commander.
Infrastructure, not only he has sold India abroad, not only is now people looking at India as a new India, rising India, but he has also ensured that he has got maximum value for every buck that he has spent of the Indian taxpayers' money, which means the 5 trillion dream that we are talking about, that is going to be...
No, it's about efficiency and getting it done. No, this has to be built before the G20. It's ready. The parliament has to be built in a couple of years. It's ready. Pramit, let me, for people watching the broadcast, Pramit Pal, when I began my career not too long ago, very much in this millennium, and I remember first time becoming an MEA beat reporter and going to Shastri Bhavan, first press conference. For people who don't know, while the MEA briefing room in the Shastri Bhavan, where the XP division sits, was pretty decent, it was okay. The Shastri Bhavan itself is a rather unsavory kind of place with its rather smelly corridors. And you end up, we used to end up having samosas which were literally in a cardboard box, and you reached in and grabbed one, and that was your Ministry of External Affairs press conference. Delhi, events you could hold, maybe Vigyan Bhavan or 5-star hotel, only 2 could qualify to hold events at this scale. You couldn't have held something this scale even in Hyderabad House. It wouldn't have just been logistically possible. Now we have these, just as the facility itself. I'm sure you've seen, Pramit, in this Bharat Mandapam, from a meeting room of 10 people all the way to the convention hall of 7,000. Is this something completely different?
Completely true. When we held the Indo-Africa Summit in 2015, India was shocked because normally only about 15 African leaders would show up. This time 54 out of 55 invited showed up. India did not have a convention hall big enough to hold them. We had to hold it in a stadium. right? So you now have you had a situation in India. It's one of the reasons we never held another one, because it was so embarrassing for us. We talked a big talk, but when it actually came to the ground, India really couldn't deliver. Something simple as holding an international conference of that scale, we struggled. Now we are now increasingly in a position to be able to do that type of thing. We can actually hold international conferences, as we have done in the G20, on a scale that we've never not been, because the infrastructure.
No, and we is not just you and
airport.
government. I mean, you can now. Your organization can. I can now. My organization can. We are not stuck with just a couple of hotels in Delhi to hold our conclaves and other meetings and all. This is a game changer. I've seen the brochure of the one in Dwarka. I'm yet to visit it. But there's an airport coming up in Greater Noida. I believe one of the runways is going to open very shortly, perhaps in less than a year. So it's something fundamentally different, Pramit, from where it was not too, like I said, Shastri Bhavan, not too long ago. Imagine holding a press briefing like this, where we are holding it right now, where the press center, ladies and gentlemen, has had 2,000 workstations. 2,000 workstations. I mean, Pramit, if you, I'm sure you have a lot of friends who are journalists from abroad who come here. They won't have at least scoffed at you that we were sitting here swatting flies, and it was rather embarrassing.
I agree. I mean, there's a transformation on this, and what is happening, interestingly, is that it's spreading outside of Delhi as well.
Yeah.
You can now go to a city like Varanasi. You can hold maybe not a convention G20 level, but you can go to Rishikesh. You can go to these places. You can drive with ease to these same places and find places that you can actually hold a business conference of a size that you couldn't even conceive of before. And as the airport structure increases, what do we have? 130, 140 airports now being planned or under construction across the country. That connectivity will expand on a scale that we've never seen. And I think it's very important to understand that one reason Modi is not just about selling India to the world. This is a new India. He's selling India to Indians themselves.
Yeah.
That we can now start to think much more than outside of our little box and our towns and our cities, that we can start to think globally. And that's what we need. We in Bharat has to be about this, that you have to be starting to think.
I promise you, even Vigyan Bhavan, if you held an event, you could in the auditorium, you could fit 1,000 people, no problem, okay? But when you needed to feed them lunch, you would be feeding them lunch on the stairwell. Because it was designed for a different era. It was designed in a government holding internal events where people had lunch, except for the VIPs, didn't really matter. So it's a game changer. We're just waiting for the Prime Minister just to enter this media center and the craft bazaar. A lot of devil in the detail, Wing Commander Sudhakaran, has happened in getting all of these small puzzle pieces right. I'm not harping too much about the media center, but to just have the facilities, because had you not had them, okay, the foreign press would have come and very sorely judged you, that you couldn't get your Wi-Fi working. It was amazing. We have some visuals. You can't see it from this live shot because a lot of people standing there. But all the foreign media organizations were given, the TV organization had their own studios, soundproofed studios with their name and logo on the door. Hundreds of them were created. You had your own cubicles to sit on. You had breakaway areas. Snacks and coffee was flowing. Lunch was being catered. It was more than a slick operation.
I have to hear these things from you, because sitting in Bangalore, I didn't have the luxury of going and visiting these, marvelous.
I've been to the Mandapam before G20, so about 2-3 weeks ago, when they had just inaugurated it. But I'm also seeing it from the visuals and the feedback I'm getting from our colleagues who are there. There have been no complaints. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. So absolutely. So this man is about getting everything right. He does it at a very micro level. Even if he is the Prime Minister of India, right? He knows, like if there is an election, even if there is a local election, he doesn't sit as a Prime Minister and have a cushy time somewhere. He travels abroad and he ensures that he sleeps bare minimum, he takes bare minimum time for himself, and he is a machine who works 24/7. And with the efficiency of a robotic machine, that's what he delivers. So when we talk about all these things, he has chosen the right set of people.
Okay.
He has made them accountable. And that is why we are getting to see, witness, and experience what you are talking about today.
Okay, it's a particularly quick class thoughts. I'm trying to make it anecdotal because it becomes easier for people watching this to relate to. That this I can feel is something different. I don't mean it in an offensive way, but not too long ago, Ministry of External Affairs, the front of India, the External Publicity Division is the front of the Ministry of External Affairs. You go to Shastri Bhavan, the corridors were in a horrible state. It would honestly stink like a bathroom. You had your beetle leaf stains on the walls. It was not a place where you would take a person who has come and to showcase your country. You would feel rather apologetic and embarrassed. Now it's completely the opposite.
So let me tell you my experience, Rishabh. Last year in November, when for the first time I went to the Sushma Swaraj Bhavan, which is the G20 Secretariat headquarter, I was stunned to see that government building. I was completely blown away, the manner in which the presentations were being given by Mr. Amitabh Kant and his team, the way we were told what we have to do. It was incredible, the infrastructure there. And then, let me tell you, our final summit happened in Varanasi. The Rudraksh International Convention Center is equally good. So what is interestingly happening is that when it comes to infrastructure development, Rishabh, it is no more Delhi centric. You find it across the country, whether it is infrastructure in terms of transportation or the convention centers that are coming up across the country. And everywhere where these summits actually happened, the final summit of each of the engagement group, you had world-class convention centers or centers within major IITs where it is happening. You could not find even a single foreign delegate complaining about anything. That is the fundamental difference that we see, and we can take pride in saying it today that we have finally arrived. And the most important thing, Rishabh, India under Prime Minister Modi has shown that you can become among the fragile 5 economies of 2013 to be among the major 5 economies of the world by 2023. You can become progressive, and at the same time you can deeply remain connected to your culture.
Okay.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.